Okay, so the working title of this year is okay. So first of all, let me say the background here. So I started writing an article last year on Hamelach HaMishpat. I got three-fourths of the way through. I set it all up and just didn't write down the main idea. And I wrote enough to I think remember my intuition. But I want to finish it this year. I meant to finish it by today, but that did not happen. And I didn't even really get a chance to work on it. So what I've assembled here are all the sources. My head is not fully into it because it was last year that I was working on this. So I want to get back into it. I think I do have an approach, but I can't guarantee where it's going to go. So this is not a put together SHIUR, but at least it'll give us good stuff to think about. I'm not holding in all the facts. So this is just all the sources from that. So the working title is The Sweet Secret of Hamelach HaMishpat. Based on the fact that one of the Rishonim that we're going to read describes it as something like a Sod Na'im or something like that, or a sweet secret. So this is it's not clickbaity. It's like literally what he says, even though it is clickbaity. Okay, so the Gemara. Let's start with the Gemara. Okay, Amar. This is on Brachos Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. Amar Rabba Bar Chainana. That's apparently how they vocalize it. I always used to say Chinana, but Chainana. I guess Steinfeld knows better than I do. Mishmei Derav. Kol Hashana Kula Adam Ispalel HaKel HaKadosh Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat. So all year long, a person davens Hakel Kadosh in the third bracha and Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat in is that the 11th bracha?
Which is the
the 10th, yeah, 11th. Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. Yeah, okay, fine. Chutz me'asara yamim shebein Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim, except for the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim, shemispala hamelech hakadosh v'hamelech hamishpat. Okay. Side note, which will come up, just so you know, it's not unanimous that all year round we say melech ohev tzedakah mishpat. Okay, that happens to be a machlokas. All right, and it's even a machlokas whether our shas, I think, like whether Chazal hold that or not. Okay, it's like it's possible. This is something that happens with any nusach related thing that Shas talks about. I think it's more subject to changes in the Shas because people update the Shas based on what nusach they're saying, so instead of the other way around. But yeah. Okay, so Rabbi Elazar Amar, Afilu Amar Hakel Kadosh Yata. So Rabbi Elazar says, even if you said Hakel Kadosh, you're Yotze. Shneimar, as it says, Vayikba Adashem Tzvakos B'Mishpat Hakel Kadosh Nikdash B'Tzedakah. Okay, which we actually quote in the Shemona Esrei on Rosh Hashanah, that Hashem, Master of Legions, is exalted in justice, and the holy God or the transcendent God is sanctified in righteousness. When is God, Master of Legions, raised up in Mishpat? Those are the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim. And it says Hakel Kadosh. So he's saying that it is he seems to agree that l'chatchila you should say Hamelech HaKadosh or Hamelech HaKadosh, yeah. But he's saying that since the pasuk associates this idea of God's role in the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah with Hakel HaKadosh, then you're still Yotze. Yeah, Ezra.
How does this pasuk have to do with Melech?
Good question. I don't know if the pasuk has to do with Melech, but it's showing that there still is an idea of Hashem being associated with Mishpat during the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. So I think he's saying that in other words, even if you hold that the inyan of the bracha somehow shifts.
That's it.
Yeah.
That part I understand. What I'm saying is, well, I'm actually asking a different question.
Okay.
Not related to this year.
Okay.
But
yeah.
This is the Me'ira Chasima for Melech HaMishpat, right?
Correct. Yeah. I did give a share on this once.
Rabbi Gilbert literally gave share on this yesterday.
Oh, he did? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Let me turn up the volume so we can hear you also. Okay, fine. So I guess listen to Rabbi Gilbert's here. Yeah. This is it's a good question. Okay, then my Allah. So what is I think this just means what was the result? What was the conclusion? Amar Rav Yosef Hakel Kadosh Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat. So he holds that you say, I guess during the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, Hakel Kadosh and Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat. Rabba Amar HaMelech HaKadosh v'HaMelech HaMishpat v'Hilchos HaKarabah. Okay, so everyone holds we paskin that you should say HaMelech HaMishpat by Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll just take the notes here on here. So I guess the question, just basic question, okay, is how do you translate HaMelech HaMishpat? If Rabbi Gober talked about this, then maybe you're already thinking in these lines.
I wasn't there for it, but
yeah.
king, the
He only
judge.
talked about the main chasima for the third bracha. He didn't talk about him.
Okay, yeah. So first of all, what's the common answer?
The king of judgment.
Yeah, the king of I'm gonna go ahead and say justice. I don't know if judgment might also work. Mishpat. You could say judgment. I feel like din is judgment, but I mean both of them can work. Okay? Let's just say justice for now. Okay, it'll work better with this year. Okay, so the king of justice. Okay, but then Ezra, you said what?
The judger.
The king, the judger.
The king, maybe not.
Okay.
I don't know.
Alternatively,
Justice, but you switch that up.
the king.
What?
Switch up to
So judger would be, we have a word for that. Shofet,
Yeah,
right?
That's why.
So what would
The just or
King
something?
the justice.
Or the
the king, the justice. Okay. So this is the literal translation. Okay. So it turns out there are 3 camps among the Mefarshim. Okay. And I'll state them and then we'll read the different camps. On the one side, you have Rishonim who hold that that there is no difference between Hamelech Hamishpat and Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat. It's just like, I mean, there's no substantial difference. There are others who are in doubt, and then there are others who hold that there's a fundamental difference. Okay, so we'll start with the Tur. Okay, the Tur in Orach Chaim Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph says, I'm going to start partway through here. He says, okay, so he says your chosim Baruch Atah Hashem Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat throughout the year. Umi Rosh Hashanah V'ad Yom Kippurim chosim HaMelech HaMishpat. Okay, Kazav Achi Harav Yechiel Zal. Okay, pausing for a second here. I don't know how many of you listened to my whole thing with the avunculate marriage, with the case that I got about the right, with the uncle. So avunculate marriage in halacha is uncle marrying his niece, and the case I got was the other way around, which is not halacha. What was that?
It's also halves, so it's not as.
Yeah, it's also halves. Yeah. So I ever since then I've been like hyper alert to like cases of avunculate marriage. So I was looking up Rav Yechiel. Okay, so the Rosh had Rabbeinu Asher had 3 sons. Okay, there is Yehuda ben Asher, Yaakov ben Asher, who's the Tur, and then Yechiel ben Asher. Okay, who apparently was a Python. All right, so Yechiel ben Asher married his niece, the daughter of Yehuda ben Asher. Okay, so that's another case of avuncular marriage. And then while I'm talking about it, I also remembered that Nechama Leibowitz also married her uncle. So that's another case. Anyway, so I had not heard of Yechiel ben Asher, but it is significant that he's a Python because that means he thinks about words. Okay, more than most. Okay, so he says, Kasav Achi Harav Yechiel Zal. Me'olam tamahti al chasimas bracha zo. I've always been astonished by this chasima of this bracha, meaning during the year. Okay, lama nishtanis mikol chasimas brachos yudches le'inyan malchus. Okay, why is it different from all the other conclusions of the Shemona Esrei in terms of having malchus? Hakaimelan bracha hasmuch lechaverta ein ba malchus. Okay, we learned that when he says ein ba malchus, I think he just means you don't need to say malchus. I don't think he means like there shouldn't be malchus, but whatever. Okay, then here's the main point for our purposes. Va'od lechora eini yodea ma hefresh yesh bein melech ohev tzedakah umishpat uvein hamelech hamishpat le'inyan shetzarech lachzor l'rosh im shachach. Okay, so he says, I don't know why we should differentiate between melech ohev tzedakah mishpat and hamelech hamishpat regarding going back to the beginning if you forget. Okay. Although I don't have permission to change what is accustomed in the mouth of everyone. Omnam shamati sheba Provantia ein omrim hamelech. I heard that in Provantia they don't say hamelech. V'yashar be'enai. Okay, so I think what he means is that they don't say hamelech hamishpat. Okay, they just say melech ohev tzedakah mishpat year round. And that's good because there's no difference. Shuv matzasi v'sefer hanikra machzor vitri. Okay, it's funny, I guess it was not a well-known book back then. There's some book called Machzor Vitri, right, which we know was written by Rav Simcha Vitri, who was a Talmid Mufak of Rashi. Halacha Gimel Perakama the brachos kol hashana kula omer hakel kadosh hakel hamishpat. Okay, so that's one of the other girsaos that year round we say hakel hamishpat. חוץ מאסרס ימי תשובה, שאומר המלך הקודש המלך המשפט, לפי שעכשיו יושיב על המשפט לדון כל העולם, ומראה עצמו שהוא מלך על המשפט. Okay, so let's just track the ideas here. לפי שעכשיו, yeah, I'm just going to do this in green. Okay, so לפי שעכשיו יושב על המשפט. So why do we change? Because now God is sitting in judgment. I'm going to say in judgment. I think that's how we say it in English, not on judgment. Ladun kol olam, to judge the entire world. Umare atzmo shu melech al hamishpat. And he's manifesting or demonstrating the fact that you can't use manifest in 2024, but just people, all the, people, I'm manifesting. Yeah. What was that? That's like the Will Smiths of the world who think that by wishing things, then they can change reality. Yeah. But anyway, whatever. He's what was that?
Hashem can manifest things.
Yes, Hashem can manifest, right? That he's Melech al Mishpat. Okay. V'yish omrim kol shana Melech ohev tzedakah Mishpat. Some say, I think this is still quoting from the Machzor Vitri, that year-round you say Melech ohev tzedakah Mishpat. D'gabe Mishpat shayach lomor malchus tvei mishar brachos, because by Mishpat it is more fitting to say Melech than other brachos. And I talked about this on Monday Night Mishlei, that we tend to forget. I don't know about you. I can't speak for you. I tend to forget that when I think of Melech, I think of the king who reigns over a country, but we don't associate king with being the guy who is a judge, like the Shlomo HaMelech judging the case, and going to the king for judgment. We think of him as a source of law, but not like sitting there to judge things. But that was an association back then, even to the point where we learned Pasuk Mishlei 16:10 on Monday, where it says Kesem al Sifsei Melech, that there's a divination charm on the lips of a king. And Rashi just interprets it. He says, what does Melech mean? It means Chacham Hayoshev B'din. Okay, I mean, just any Chacham sitting in judgment is like considered a Melech in that sense. Melech b'mishpat yamid aretz. What's another pasuk in Mishlei? A king in justice will establish the land. V'nasati b'davar lifnei Adoni Avizal v'kibel devarai. So I debated this with my father, the Rosh, and he accepted my words. Okay, which I don't know if that means that. What was that? Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's funny also, because sorry. Okay, now I'm confused, because Adoni Avi is the thing that the Torah says all the time, but then he says Ad Khan, which makes it sound like
this whole thing is brother.
Oh yeah, okay. The whole thing is his brother, but then he's also quoting Machzor Vitri. So yeah, I do think, I do think it makes sense to say this is Rabbi Chiel. Okay.
Also, is that like the?
I think that was still in the Machzor Vitri.
Okay.
Yeah, not entirely sure. I honestly don't care that much as long as we know that there is a Shita that exists like this. Yeah, Isaiah?
Yeah, I didn't really understand the main first Shita of the Machzor Vitri, where it sounds like he's saying, well, I guess my problem with it is that God doesn't change like at this time of year. Really, right. God's always the same. So like, it sounded like he was saying like it's more like how do you reconcile that with what he said? Basically.
Right. Okay. So just to quote the Rambam here, and just to ponder myself from Mishpat, in the Rambam in Rosh Hashanah 1:2. So the Mishnah says, "Baba Prakam Elam Nidon b'Pesach al Tavua b'Aseres al Peres Ilan Rosh Hashanah Kol Bay Olam Orin Lefan of Kibnei Maron." So the Rambam says, what does it mean? Klomar shemachashvin im bnei Adam v'dani osan lebrius umacha umaves v'chaim v'zulazeh mishar matzav Adam. So on Rosh Hashanah, God reckons with all human beings, and he judges them, sentences them to health, disease, life, and death, other human circumstances. And he says, Upshat lashon zeh barur k'mo she'ata roeh. The pshat is very clear, as you see. Aval sodo ve'inyano ein savik shu kasha me'od. But the esoteric idea and the meaning are very difficult. So standing question about what goes on during this Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. But to answer Isaiah's question in terms of what's going on here, it's saying that whatever happens, God's mishpat is more manifest during these 10 days. So I think you can say that without saying that God changes during these 10 days. But it's definitely on our minds, because there is for us a din that happens, however that works. So that's all I got, Isaiah. Okay, so that's opinion number one, which is I'm just going to say Rav Yechiel ben Harosh holds there's no substantial difference between Hamelech HaMishpat and Melech Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat in terms of necessitating Chazar LaRosh. That's not a pun. meaning that even if you said that we need to change the chasima of the bracha, this would still qualify as the changed chasima. Okay, so the ideas are that similar. Yeah, David?
One other thing also, it seems that meaning his understanding of what Hamal HaMishpat is like it's essentially a shortened Hamal HaMishpat.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
Understanding what is the switch that you are or not making.
Yeah. Okay. And Hamal HaMishpat is a concise way of saying Melech al HaMishpat Mishpat or Melech HaYoshev Lishpot. Right. Oh, sorry. Al and Lishpot. Yeah, Ezra?
Just, I don't know if this is very important, but just to clarify,
Yeah.
it seems like he's saying that he can't really tell a difference, but he's not confident enough to like Pascha not to do it, right?
Right. Yeah, the only question is at the end.
Right, what's he saying?
What does he say? Yeah, right.
He does say in a Rashai Lashanos.
Yeah, that's true. Right. Yeah. He likes Provantia, but he doesn't want to actually, he can't change it. Yeah. We're gonna see some of the thing in Rashi in a second. By the way, I think it's also possible that when he says he discussed this with his father, it might be about the original question about why Melech is mentioned in the Chasima here, whereas we don't usually have Melech in a Berachah Hasmucha L'Chaverta. Okay, fine. All right. So now we go to Rashi. Okay. So there's two Rashis. There's public Rashi and private Rashi. Okay. Public Rashi on the Gemara says like this: Hamelech HaKadosh, Lifi Shebiyamim Halalu Humare Malchuso Lishpot. I wonder if that's a mistake in the Dibra Maskil. Right? That sounds like he's commenting on Hamelech HaMishpat, but unless he's referencing that idea of Igbad Hashem Tzvakos.
I think he's saying instead of Hakel,
Oh,
Melech, because this days we're fearing of the Malchus.
that
he will be judging the world.
Okay, right. So, but he is inserting. In other words, he's saying though that the reason why. Maybe this is just me. I was always under the impression that the reason why we switched to Hamelech HaKadosh in Hakel HaKadosh is because Malchus Hashem is Yichud Hashem, and it is the same idea of Kel HaKadosh means the transcendent God who is separate from all physicality and absolutely one. But when we have the expanded third bracha, we talk about God's Malchus being recognized by the entire world. So we refer to Kedushas Hashem and Yichud Hashem via Malchus. But he seems to be saying, no, the reason why we say Melech HaKadosh is to bring the idea of Mishpat into the third bracha. Yeah, okay. But then Hamelech HaMishpat, Kamo Melech HaMishpat. Okay, so he says there's no difference between Hamelech HaMishpat and Melech HaMishpat.
Oh, doesn't the same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah. Okay. Kamo nose ha'aron habris, kamo aron habris. Okay, so he brings a raya that in Sefer Yehoshua we use this weird grammatical form of. So it really means the Ark of the Covenant, not the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, and everyone's going to hold by that example. V'chein hamisgaros hamechonos. Okay, I forgot what that means, but same thing there. Shehu kamo misgaros hamechonos. Okay. Okay, so he's trying to like calm the grammar people, okay, the Fistels of the world, that no, this is an acceptable form, even though it's grammatically weird. Okay, so that's the public Rashi. Okay, but then the private Rashi in Chuvos Rashi, okay, in Yochas, he says like this: Hamelech HaMishpat shehuk shabo shayalanu lomar Melech HaMishpat. Okay, so people are bothered. Why does it say Hamelech HaMishpat when we should say Melech HaMishpat? Gam ani hukshesi ba ze shanim rabos. I've been bothered by this for years. Okay, it's so funny. By the way, you rarely see Rashi speak in first person, unless to say like I don't know or whatever, you know. But like you don't see him narrating his personal learning life, right? Which I maybe because we don't learn Chuvos Rashi. Okay, so I've been bothered by this for years. But Omer Li Libi, my heart tells me, okay, shiha girsa lefi merutsasam shagu, that people messed up the girsa based on habit. Okay, why? Begirsas Hamelech HaKadosh im Hamelech HaMishpat. Okay, so my understanding of that means really it should be Hamelech HaKadosh and Melech HaMishpat. But since people changed the girsa to Hamelech HaKadosh, they just put the extra hey in Hamelech HaMishpat, right? So it's like the Hamon Am made this error and then just kind of stuck. Okay. Which, by the way, just grammatically, why is Hamelech HaKadosh not a problem, whereas Hamelech HaMishpat is a problem?
We
You're giving
Kadosh. We were saying Melech not Hamelach.
Yeah, right. But I get just in terms of these two phrases here, there's nothing grammatically wrong with Hamelach HaKadosh, but Hamel HaMishpat's funky.
Is it possible because it makes sense to call God Melech and Kadosh, but not Mishpat?
Yeah, exactly. So just in grammatical terms, Kadosh is an adjective,
Yeah.
right? Exactly, right? So you can say Hamel HaKadosh means the holy king, but Mishpat is not an adjective. So you can't say the king, the Mishpat. Like, it's a noun. All right. What was that?
You only have one dot, sister.
Yeah, exactly. You have to use one dot. Okay. Shelo l'shanus min harishonim yesh lanu lismach al kama mikros shedibru b'lashon zeh b'sefer Yoshua v'hi b'nesoa ha'am me'oholehem v'aron habris v'ein lanu lomar she'aron isn't this supposed to say no, never mind. Aron habris v'ein lanu lomar she'aron asmo bris ela haluchos shebo k'mo shekruhu b'kama mikros aron habris aron ha'edus. So he's just going through the psukim he quoted. Vaiksof achaz as hamisgaros hamachonos umatarmin yas gedanfe besisia uvesefer Yirmiyah kol ha'emek ha'pagarim v'hadeshin kamo emek ha'pagarim v'es hamizbeach hanachoshes asher lifnei Hashem v'yitin v'etain es ha'sefer ha'mikne yitin chavivi libo v'yimtza harbe la'azara. Okay, hold on. How did I translate that? Got to go to my article. I avoided it. How convenient. Oh, wait. Did I? Okay, yeah. No, fine. Okay, so I avoided it. All right, fine. So you see that Rashi is in doubt about this, right? He really says that, like, so let me just summarize here. Rashi. Okay, so Rashi says, Rashi says it should be Melech HaMishpat, grammatically, but we let it slide because but it got corrupted through people's ignorance and we let it slide because there are instances in the psukim where it makes sense. Okay, but you see, yeah.
So those pieces also make sense. Like those also it was noun and noun.
Yeah, right. But so he's saying though that you see that there is precedent. He's kind of going with the assumption that biblical Hebrew is going to be the golden standard, and so it's an accepted usage, even though it's a weird thing. But you see that Rashi is not bothered to say that HaMelech HaMishpat is like a substantially different idea than Melech HaMishpat, right? He's just like saying it means the same thing. Okay.
Why did the Nevi'im use that language if it's wrong?
I don't know, and it might not be like their language does, unless you talk to Rav Hirsch. Language does evolve, and so it could just be that used to be an acceptable form in Hebrew, and then it fell out of usage, and we don't say it anymore, and now we go with by the time the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah came along, then it was different grammatical rules. Like there are different strata of like Hebrew grammar in Tanakh. So I don't know for sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now we get to the sweet stuff. Okay. So first source here is the Ritva. Okay, and if you're on the Ramam Yomi discussion group, then this came up with Baruch Dayan HaEmes and Rabbi Zucker saying what the real translation of Dayan HaEmes should be. But okay, well, so Ritva says like this in Rosh Hashanah Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. V'garsinu b'pirka kama de brachos to Aseres Yamim shebein Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim Omer HaMelech HaMishpat v'HaMelech HaMishpat v'im Amar Hakel HaKadosh lo yatza. Okay, so that we paskin like that you're not yotze if you say Hakel HaKadosh. Kida pasuk harif zal v'hu anachon. Rabbeinu Yonazal hayasover she'eno chozer ela b'shamar hakel hakadosh hakel hamishpat. Aval im amar melech ohev tzedaka o mishpat kamosh anu nohagim hayom yatza. So Rabbeinu Yonah holds that you really should say hamelech hamishpat during Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. If you said hakel hamishpat, you'd have to go back. Okay, which was a girsa. Okay, but we say melech ohev tzedaka o mishpat year round. So even though we should change it to HaMelech HaMishpat during Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, we're Yotze, yeah.
I thought you were saying if you say Hakel HaKadosh HaMishpat, then you go back.
So I think he means if you say Hakel HaKadosh for the third bracha and Hakel HaMishpat for the 11th bracha. Yeah, right. Then you go back. But if you say Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, then you don't go back.
And you say Hakel HaKadosh?
And if you say Hakel HaKadosh, you would also go back. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I think he means for each of those mistakes, then you would go back, but we don't have to go back. Because you mentioned Malchus. Okay, so you see, again, I'm trying to set you up for this, that they just hold that you insert the idea of Malchus and that's the ikr, you know. So we really should be Hamelach HaMishpat, but we just say Malchus and we're Yotze. Yeah, David.
It seems interesting because I would think that you need to like point what the bringing Malchut would be, not just mentioning that it's there.
Yeah, right.
It's interesting that is still, as far as they're concerned, enough. I mean, at least to be Yotze.
Yeah,
That's enough.
yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. Yeah, yeah, and hopefully we'll get to the bottom of that because it's going to be a difference in what the bracha means. Okay, Aval Talmidei Rabbeinu Hagadol Zal. Now I don't know if his Rebbe was the Ramban. I thought, right? Is that true? Let's just check. Ritva was, oh, there's a little family tree. Ritva, the Rashba, and the Rashba was talking to the Ramban. Yeah, or it could be the Ra'ah. That's our own Levi. Yeah, so I don't know who Rabbeinu Hagadol is. Kasvu Mishmo, they wrote in his name, Sha'afilu Amar Melech Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat Yesh Lachzor. Even if you say Melech Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat, you got to go back. V'zeh yadu lemevin sod ha'inyan. Lama tzarich lomar hamelech hamishpat. Okay, so this is going to be clear to those who understand the secret, okay, of why we say hamelech hamishpat. Shenira kilashon meshubash. It seems like bad grammar. V'hu matok leroy hashemesh. It's sweet to those who see the sun. Okay. Okay, so that's his that's where the title of the share comes from. Okay. Let me just highlight this so we know the Shafilu Amar. Okay, this is the position. Okay, V'imhu Safek Biado Choser. And if there's a Safek about whether he said it or not, he goes back to Mistama Daishe Dekula Shaita Nakat. So if you're in doubt whether you said it, then you assume you did what you did all year long and you go back. Ukamosh Amr Biyushami, Gabi Morid Hata Umrid Geshem. Shekol Shloshim Yom Sveko Choser V'chein Halacha Mipi Rabbeinu Nevzhu. So we obviously don't paskin in our scroll sitter that you go back for Hamelech HaMishpat, but he paskins that you do because of this sod. Okay, so apparently you're messing up the inyan of the bracha there.
What's the sod?
The sod is for those who see the sun, they'll know it. Okay, but the sod is why is it use a lashon meshubash of Hamelech HaMishpat? But he didn't say what the sod is. Okay, but he's saying in others, but the sod is ma'akev. Whatever the sod is, it's ma'akev.
Okay.
Okay.
Does
Yeah.
he mean sod in the sense of like when the like somebody with the Ramban say sod like Kabbalah sod?
So I don't know, and that's why I have to see how this article turns out about whether I make it a paid post or not, because I don't know how confident I am in doing this, but you know, we have a commentary on the Rambam who explains the sod, so I'm going to try to go based on that. Okay, so I think I got this from either the footnote in the Ritva on Shas or the footnote in my Abu Dharam Hashalim. So I assume we're not needing to have a hard stop at 9:15. Is there a morning seder? I mean morning shir? Okay, fine. All right. So yeah. Okay. So this Sefer HaMenucha, which I have to look up who wrote this. Sefer HaMenucha is I've never heard of this. Rabbeinu Manoach ben Yaakov. Late 13th to early 14th century in France. Okay. Commentary on the Rambam, apparently. Okay, or maybe just say for Ava. Okay. So he says like this. Kol Hashana, so let's actually just read the Rambam just to see what the Rambam says. Because there's also some confusion about the Rambam. Rambam says in Hilos Tefillah Birkas Kohanim 2:18, Kol Hashana Kula Chosim Birkas Berachah Shlishis Hakel HaKadosh. Ubirkas Achas Esrei Melech Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat. Uvaseres Yamim Shemir Rosh Hashanah v'Ad Yom Motzai Yom HaKippurim Chosim B'Shlishis HaMelech HaKadosh Uva'achas Esrei HaMelech HaMishpat. Okay, and he doesn't say about whether you go back or not, but I think the confusion is, maybe the Yad Pshuta mentions it. I think there's a question of whether Hishvis Seder, so the Yad Pshuta says Hishvis Seder Hatfila B'Sof Sefer Ava B'Nusach HaBracha Melech Tzedakah Mishpat Huavar Kav Al Tevas Melech L'Machaka. So in the Rambam's Siddur HaTefillah, which I think we have from the Muga, he crosses out the word Melech. Okay, so this is one of the Rambam's changes. So it seems like the Rambam holds that you don't say Melech throughout the year. Okay, but Amnam Nishal Rabbeinu, the Rambam was asked, so someone asked him directly, should you say Melech on the rest of the year, right? V'heshiv v'nusach habracha hayudches hu shiachtem ba baruch Hashem ohev tzedakah umishpat. Okay, ve'enu chayv lahaskir melech el b'aseres hayamim. Okay, so Rambam seems to say you should say just Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat. Hamahadir Sin Sham the Teshuvas Rabbeinu Yehoshua Hanagid Mi Bnei Banav Shel Rabbeinu. Yeah, there's a long footnote there in the Rambam Siddur.
Really?
Yeah, so the grandson of the I forgot if this is a literal grandson or like an offspring of the Rambam, wrote Shekvar Nishal Astirzo Bain Hahalacha Kan Leperak Asiri V'Seder HaTefillah. So he was asked about all the Rambam sources. And V'chein Tzion L'Shai L'Teshuvas Rimigash, quote, Lo Manu Ulomar Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat B'Shari Mos Hashana, that we don't prevent you from saying Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat for the rest of the year. I believe the Siddur Paskins that you can say either.
Yeah, it says Nusach Achrona, Nosach Melech.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, and I think, is there a long footnote there in Shacharis? Okay, maybe it's... Yeah, okay, fine. So both nuschas are good. Od muchach medivrei Rimigash sham shagam ba'aseres Ymei Teshuvah amar im amar melech ohev tzedakah mishpat yatza. So the Rimigash holds you are yotze kim shizkir melech. Ella shemikol makom l'chadchila roy lamar hamelech hamishpat. Zehu masha rabbeinu mashminu kan. Klomar kol shana chosim im rote melech ohev v'chulei v'afa bichein ba'aseres hayamim l'chadchila roy lachtam hamelech hamishpat. So he's saying that the lashon of the Rambam is consistent. That he says in the halachos melech ohev tzedakah mishpat is okay to say. Okay, so here's the Sefer Menucha. Actually, can you pass me the Siddur? I just want to see what the Siddur says on the footnote. Thanks. Okay, so the footnote says Shinnun Ksuv Hachi Brov Kisve Yad V'Chasam. So the majority of the manuscripts and the Sefer Hamuga, which by the way, PSA, the Sefer Hamuga is now available on Al HaTorah. Huga Misifri. So this is the way that the one that the Rambam himself signed off on, and it says Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat in the halachos. I haven't looked in the Siddur. Okay, then he says the Miktach Tisvia Nosefes Kan Tevas Melech. Okay, Ksuv Hachi B'Takalil, and it's written this way in the Yemenite Sidurim. V'amnam Rabbi Yehoshua Hanagid Matasi Mitzetzai Rabbeinu Ba'achas Mitchuvosav. Kasav Shkin Yesh Libros. Okay, fine. So just paraphrase what it's like here.
Yeah, is one specifically for Testament Shuvah.
Right. Okay. Okay, so let's look at this Sefer Menucha. Kol Shana Kula Chosim Berachah Shlishis Hakel HaKadosh V'Chulei U'Aseres Ymei Mishmar Rosh Hashanah. Okay, Amar HaMefaresh. So the commentator, which I assume is himself, says the fish Inyan Malchus More Hashgachas Adon Liaser Kol Ma'avis Darko. So he says the Lashon Malchus indicates that the providence of the master, I guess, is to rebuke those who pervert his way, meaning those who violate his way. Uvizman hahu, and in this time, Malchus Sha'olam Yoshev al Kisei Din Lishpo B'nei Ha'adam. The king of the world sits and judges the people. Lefikach tiknu lomar hamelech hamishpat. And that's why they were Masaki and Hamelech HaMishpat. Okay, so plain shot, similar to Rashi, is that we change it to recognize the din. He's saying the din of that there's a punishment, not the din of like sentencing. Okay, but it's a reference to the idea of God sitting b'din and punishing. Okay. Lefikach tiknu lomar hamelech hamishpat. Okay. V'alfa gav the kol shata nami amrinan melech ohev tzedakah mishpat. Hefresh yesh ben melech ohev v'chule v'hamelech hamishpat. The melech ohev mashma shu ohev sheyisnahagu bruav b'tzedek u'v'mishpat. Okay, so I never really thought about this. So I read this. Year round, if you say the God who loves tzedek u'mishpat, it means that God wants us to be noheg in tzedek u'mishpat. Okay, about hamelech hamishpat rotze lomar shehu yisale shofet ha'olam. But hamelech hamishpat is referring to God judging the world. Okay. So that's how you can tell. So that would be a substantial difference, right? It's not just we throw in Malchus. It's that throughout the year, we say God endorses Tzedakah Mishpat for us to do. But on the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, we're referencing the fact, we're not negating this, but we're referencing the fact that God judges the world. So it is a difference in Inyan. Yeah.
How does that fit with the whole bracha, the rest of the year? It seems like it's all talking about God judging. Not relevant.
I mean, it's probably relevant, but I don't know if we can go into it. Hashiva shoftinu kavari shana v'yoatzinu kavat chila v'hasar mimenu yugon manacha u'muloch aleinu ata adashem levadecha b'chesed b'rachim b'mishpat So the second line is definitely talking about God ruling over us, right? But it does seem like the restoration of the judges is how we are noheg tzedakah mishpat, and so we are asking God to facilitate our enacting of tzedakah mishpat. I think that's pshat at least. Yeah, David.
Could I ask what you were just saying? So far as how you talk about tefillah,
Yeah,
as we do throughout the year, that like we're not just asking God to do these things, but the way that what we're asking for is saying like we should be looking at what we are mitpalel for, and we should enact
right,
those things.
right.
In which case, how is we should just then say, oh, it's tzedakah mishpat that God loves these things.
Yeah,
and we should be enacting
yeah.
that in the way that we were saying, oh, hey, tzedakah mishpat does the same exact thing.
Meaning without the melech?
My question is, why not have melech in there throughout the year? Because having melech throughout the year is the same thing as just not having the word melech throughout the year. Like,
Yeah, right. Yeah, it does seem like according to this, and according to what we saw from the Rambam, he holds that in terms of throughout the year, melech ohev tzedakah mishpat and ohev tzedakah mishpat are the same.
So why is there any difference?
There might not be a difference, unless you're going to say some other idea about why melech, for example, just to quote another idea of the Abu Dharam's answer to the question of why Malchus shows up. So he says that we have Malchus in the first three brachos. Is that true? Definitely in the first one, right? What about the second one? Melech Machayim, Melech Memis Machayeh, and then in the third one, maybe during Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. Yeah, I don't know. He says we have it in the first three. So he says that Malchus is the first three brachos are associated with the Avos, and then the bracha of Hashiva Shaftinu is associated with David HaMelech, and David HaMelech has is associated with being a melech of mishpat and stuff. So he gives an answer for why like melech would be appropriate in the 11th bracha, but not necessary. Okay, but so for our purposes, according to the Rambam, according to Sefer Menucha, year round, no difference between saying melech ohev tzedakah mishpat or ohev tzedakah mishpat. But ha-melech mishpat, there is a difference because it's saying that God is Yoshev Biden. So that's or Yoshev Lishpot in terms of executing justice. Okay, but that's the standard idea. Okay, the inami, alternatively, mashma'o shehu atzmo hu hamishpat. Okay, it implies that God himself is the justice. Now, if you just read the phrase ha-melech mishpat, I mean, it does imply that, right? The God, the justice. K'mosh anu omrim, like we say in the Rambam in Yesodei HaTorah, hu hamada hu hachachma. Let's actually read this inside, okay? I know this is one of the most difficult ideas in Yesodei HaTorah, that anytime you have to excuse yourself and say we don't mean this the way that the Christians mean it, then it's very uncomfortable. So what does he mean here? So he says, we were talking about this in the discussion chat. Okay, angelic knowledge. This is in 2:10. 2:8. All these forms, meaning the angels, Chaim u'Machir Habore, Yodin also Gedea Gedola Ad L'Ma'od. So all the angels know the Creator. They know and recognize. They're alive and they recognize the Creator and know Him with a great exceeding knowledge. Kol tzura v'tzura lefi ma'alasa, lo lefi godlo. Each and every tzura according to its level, not according to His greatness. Afilu ma'ala harishona, even the highest level of angels, with Chayos HaKodesh, even the highest level cannot grasp the reality of the Creator as it is. Its mind is insufficient to grasp it. Aval, but masegas v'yodas yeser mimash masegas v'yodas sur shel mata mimenu. But the highest level of angel grasps and knows more than the level below it. And same thing with every level. Ad mala Aseres, until the 10th level. Even the 10th level, which is Ishim, which is the active intellect, knows God's reality in a way that man, who is comprised of matter and form, cannot know it while he's alive. But nothing knows God the way he knows himself. All existences, except for the Creator, from the highest form to the smallest gnat in the belly of the earth, all of them exist from the reality of His existence. And since He knows Himself, and he recognizes his own greatness and his splendor and his reality. Hu yodeh hakol. Therefore, he knows everything. The ein davar nela mimeno, and nothing is hidden from him. So that's whatever this means. God knows everything because he knows himself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makir amito v'yodea osa kamoshi. God recognizes his reality and knows it as it is. Ve'eno yodea b'dea shehi chutz mimenu. He does not know with the knowledge external to himself. Kamosh anu yodim, as we know. She'ein anu v'datenu echad, because we and our knowledge are not one. Aval habore hu v'dato v'chayav echad mikol tzal mikol pina. But God, the creator, and his mind and his existence, his life, are all one from every side and every angle. If God lived with a life or knew with a knowledge, there'd be many gods. Hu v'chaya v'dato, he and his life and his mind, but that's not true. But he is one from every angle, every aspect, and in every manner of oneness. Nimse somer, consequently, one can say, Hu hayodea v'hu hayadua v'hu hadea atma, hakol echad. God is the knower, God is the known, and God is the knowledge itself. They're all one. Okay, this is this very deep idea. And this principle, there's no power in the mouth to say it, and nor in the ear to hear it, nor in the heart of man, the mind of man to understand it clearly. That's why we say, by the life of Paro, and by the life of your soul. We don't say by the life of Hashem, because that would imply that he and his life are two different things. Ella Chai Hashem, we say the living God, which is closer to the true idea that God and his life are one. She'ena borev Chai of Shnaim, God and his life are not two things. Like the lives of bodies or the lives of angels. One more paragraph. Therefore, God does not recognize his creations and know them qua them. As we know them. He knows them by virtue of himself. Since God knows himself, he knows everything, since everything is dependent on his existence. Okay, so whatever that is, simple idea. Okay, yeah. All right, so the idea here is, so what he's saying is, in the same way that we say God and his knowledge are one, or the knower, the known, and the knowledge itself are one, so too, the Sefer HaMenucha is saying that God is the justice. Kamosh anu omrim, hu hamada v'hu hachachma. She'ein lomar alav yisala chacham umevin. We don't say that God is wise and understanding, which would imply that God acquires wisdom and understanding from another. Rather, we say God is the knowledge because he gets it from himself, so to speak. Okay. Actually, I'm going to highlight this in blue just to show you that this is where the idea is. And because these are days of pardon and atonement, every person has to rouse himself through his brachos to recognize his creator. Therefore, if you make a mistake and you forget this, you have to go back, because this is a different idea. Okay, so the question is, what does he mean? Not that we have to understand the idea of God, the knower, the known, and the knowledge being the same, but that's our model. So what do we mean when we say God is the justice? And I'm just going to write this up here in our notes here. Is the Sefer HaMenucha has two interpretations. So one is Melech Ohev Tzedakah Umishpat means that God wants us to engage in tzedakah umishpat, whereas Hamelech HaMishpat means that God engages in mishpat during this time. Okay, that's his first idea. His second idea is Hamelech HaMishpat means the king, the justice, which means that God himself is justice in the same way that God himself is knowledge. Okay. Yeah. So the question is, what does this mean? Yeah, David.
Two things on the second one.
Yeah.
First, it gives me a very similar feel to in
Yeah.
like that God is the, or maybe a different part of that bracha is
Yeah.
more, but that God is the source of chachma, da'at.
Yeah.
That's just like one thing. It seems similar to that.
Yeah.
And my thought, like what he's saying there, is that justice is not something that's like external than God is aligning himself with.
Yeah.
But rather justice emanates from God and what God dictates as justice.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of like how it happens all the time nowadays, where people will be like getting into like some like popular philosophical debate, and then maybe from there trying to like understand how halakha sees it instead of what does halakha say about it, and then formulate my own opinion.
Right. Okay.
On that.
I think that's a good first step. So I'm just gonna say a step here. Okay. And this step I am confident in. Everything beyond this I'm not. Okay. Which is that a human judge, the role of a human judge, a human judge is to assess whether a particular I guess action is in line with justice. Okay. When we say that God engages in judgment, okay, we don't mean that God aligns himself with a justice that exists outside of him. Okay. And you have to say here, pas v'shalom. Okay. Right. Rather, God himself is the source of justice. Okay. So that's step one. Okay. And that's a conservative way of saying it. Okay. The question is, can we go further?
One thing that's interesting is that, like, when we say God is the knower, that seems like something more, at least more reasonable to say is like internal to God, as opposed to justice, which at least and so seemingly describes like a reality of the world.
Yeah.
It's like it acts in a certain way.
Okay.
But that's not, that sounds a little funnier or like stranger to say in terms of God.
Okay. So on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, what do we mean when we talk about God's knowledge of things or God knowing things?
Well, like, I mean, in a certain sense, it's in terms of his actions.
Right. Is knowledge, God's knowledge of things, yadati, ki yadati v'leman asher yitzaves banavis beso acharav lishmor derech. I just mangled two psukim. Right. But the God knowing Abraham, right, is means God being mashgiach on Abraham, right?
Or is that what we mean when we say God is the knowledge?
Well, so that
we don't mean his actions only there.
Well, here's the thing, right? Is that this Rambam that we said several times, but especially at the end, mipnei shehu yodea atmo yeda hakol shakol nismach b'havayaso lo. Everything relies for its existence on God, and similarly, he started off the discourse here by saying, no, I guess he didn't start it off. Yeah. כל הנמצאים חוץ מן הבורא מסור ראשון ועד יתוש קטן שיהיה בתור הארץ, וכל מכוח אמיתו נמצאו. They all exist by the power of his reality. ולפי שהוא יודע עצמו, since he knows himself, ומכיר גדול ותפארתו ואמיתו, הוא יודע הכל ואין דבר נעלם ממנו. So, like, God knowing something and God being mashgiach on something, and God sustaining its existence, or something being real, I think there is a more intrinsic connection than we tend to think of. And again, I'll point this out that I think people tend to lump into one category, like when we're talking about ideas about God's oneness, non-physicality, his eternity, his omniscience, right? But omniscience is different, because where does the Rambam put God's omniscience in the 13 Ikarim?
Which one's omniscience? All-knowing?
All-knowing, yeah. Yeah, so where's that?
Later on.
Yeah, it's later on. Yeah, I think it's number 10. Yeah, right. I think it's number 10. So the question is, if we're talking about God, if God's knowledge is one and the same as God, you would think he would put it with the Ikarim about God. You would go God's existence, God's oneness, God's non-physicality, his eternality, and his knowledge, right? But he puts it 10th, which is all about God's actions and interactions with the world. So there is this like deliberate blurring of the line of God knowing things and God being mashgiach on things. So, or you have, I don't know if you've ever seen this phrase. Where does the Rambam say this in the Morah? He says it in a couple places. That he says everything is based on is in line with God's wisdom, with God's will, or if you prefer, his wisdom. There is a sense in which God's wisdom and will are synonymous. Not all the time, but there's that connection, and this is why I'm hesitant to go forward in this sode here. Yeah. So speaking of the Rambam, I'll just show you. I'll lay out the rest of my cards on the table. This is the only other thing I have is I went to what does the Rambam say about God being a shofet in the Mor Nevuchim? Okay. So in the parak, my favorite parak, in Gimel Nun Gimel, he defines Chesed, Mishpat, and Tzedakah, right? And Mishpat is the most simple definition. So Chesed is doing something beyond what you owe. Tzedakah is giving each thing what it needs. Okay, and then Mishpat, he just says at the end, Asher lebitui Mishpat mashma'uso ladun es hanidon kfi haroi lo, is to sentence the person on trial according to what is proper for him. Bein imzo hatava o anisha, whether this is a benefit to him or a punishment. Okay, so Mishpat here it refers to like meting out justice. Okay, like executing justice. Okay. In Cain, if so, Allah biyadinu shechesed chal al hatava be'ofen klali. So if so, chesed applies to general beneficence. Utzdaka al kol tov she'ata ose b'shal mida tova sha'al yada ata mevi es atmo l'shlemus. Tzedakah is any good that you do that belongs to a good mida through which you perfect yourself. Umishpat yesh Totsa'aso tie onesh v'ish shetie tova. Some mishpat is punishment, some is beneficence. Ukvar bi'arnu b'shlila satarim shekol torah shehashem mitur bo b'sifra nevi'im hu torah pu'ula. And we've explained earlier in the Morah 153 to 154 that all of the attributes that God is attributed with are descriptions of his action. Okay, but now he goes in the last paragraph and he says, what does it mean that God is called Chasid and Tzaddik and Shofet? Okay, so he says, Nimsa shemibuchinas havas es hakiyum lemetzius hu nikra chasid. So by virtue of giving existence to all existing things, he's called a chasid. Okay. Oh, sorry. Es hayikum lemetzius, bringing reality into existence. He's called a chasid. Actually, let me just check and see how Goodman translates this. Better call Saul. Let's see. Oh, no, that's not the one. He says, every predicate biblically applied to God points to his actions as the creator of the universe. He's called gracious. Okay, creator of the universe is a very loose translation. I don't like that. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I forgot what Yukum means. I think Yukum means existence or world. I mean, people call Yukum. Maybe people, I don't know. Okay, so why is that chesed on the part of God? Why do we call? So he's saying we call God a chesed because he created the world, he created the universe. So why is chesed? If chesed means excess, doing stuff that you're not.
There's no demand on him.
Yeah, there's no demand on him, right? It was an act of free will on the part of God, so to speak, that he created the world, and he doesn't owe the world anything. He didn't need to, despite what some Kabbalists and Hasidim say, that he needed to create the world to express his love. Yeah, that's the wrong God. And by virtue of God's mercy on the weak or the lacking, okay, meaning the governance of living creatures by their faculties, he's called a tzaddik. Okay, so again, tzedakah is when you bring something in line with its design and help it to flourish, or for a human, it's when you do something that's in line with good midos to your rational soul that makes you perfected. So we call God a tzaddik because he equipped each creature with the ability to sustain its own existence. Okay, that's in line with the Rabag on the Yeguvim Yosarachim that I gave the shir on. Rabag talks about that a lot. Okay, this is the most difficult one, and this is the one we're interested in. Hatovos hayachasios, and because of the relative goods, okay, or subjective goods. This is like when you talk about in the Moreh 1-2, when he talks about Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, that we went from the world of Emes V'Sheker to Tov V'Ra, and Tov V'Ra are relative goods, okay? It's not objective reality like Emes and Sheker. V'hapegaim hagdolim, and great misfortunes, I think the pegaim here is misfortunes, hayachasim, that are relative, hamisrachim ba'olam, that happen in the world, shechiyav osam hadin hanovea min hachachma, which are necessitated by the din that flows from chachma, hu nikra shofet. He's called a shofet. Okay, so God making things happen in the world that are relatively good or bad, that din, which comes from chachma, he's called a shofet. Okay, and let's see if the side commentary of Makbili says anything, and then we're going to go to the big commentary of Makbili. So he says, everything that God does is in the definition of good, because no evil descends from above. But human beings think in a relative manner that some of God's actions are good and some are bad. At a time when God actually governs his world with mishpat and tzedakah without any injustice. So in other words, we ascribe evil to God, but that's really not true. That's just like our own mistake. Okay. So the question, and he says, HaTorah kavar hishtamsha b'meforish b'shloshes hashemos ha'ela hashofet kol ha'aretz lo yaseh mishpat kel emunah ve'inav tzadik v'yasharhu and rav chesed. Okay, so the question is, does this help us? So, yeah.
How do you define mishpat again?
So mishpat is the execution of din. So let's say to award in human courts, it's if you are claiming money from David, saying that he didn't pay you back, and he says he did pay you back, and I say, okay, he has to give you the money. That's mishpat. It's good for you. It's bad for him, but it's executing justice. And in the world, it's things that come from nature in accordance with God's chachma. Okay, so thankfully we have the gray box makbili. Okay, so these gray box makbilis are so essential because this is essentially his shiurim on the Moreh Nevuchim. Okay, but because they're in modern Hebrew and I don't know modern Hebrew, I have to rely on ChatGPT. Okay, so we're going to read ChatGPT's translations of the makbili commentary. So he says like this. I'm just going to read it in the English here. And then if we doubt it, we'll go back. Kindness, righteousness, and justice. The description of God as kind, meaning one who acts with kindness, refers to bringing the universe into existence. This is also the meaning of describing him as capable, yachol, meaning his mere existence suffices to bring other things into existence. I've heard that's the Ralbag's idea of kel shakai, that hakel should die b'mitziuso l'chol nimsa, the God who is sufficient in his existence to bring other things into existence. So it's referring to God as the independent existence and everything is dependent on him. And it is likewise the meaning of describing him as chanun, which occurs when we give something to someone to whom we are not obligated. Thus, any good that comes from him, may he be exalted, is called chesed, contrary to the traditional view that a person deserves reward for their deeds and has a sort of moral claim to receive good due to their actions. Okay, so ultimately, everything God does is chesed. Okay, next. Describing God as tzaddik, meaning one who acts with righteousness, refers to guiding living beings through their powers, which grants them the ability to fulfill their essence. So for animals, that means surviving and thriving and reproducing. And for us, it means living in line with our Telem Elokim and perfecting our midos and seeking truth. This is also the meaning of describing him as compassionate, rachum, meaning creating in a person and in the one who raises him after his birth powers that prevent him from death and destruction, protecting him from all harm and benefit in his necessary actions. By this, a person is able to cope with life's difficulties. As he writes in the first part of this work, quote, just as there is in a person a certain power that binds his limbs together and governs them and gives each limb what is appropriate to maintain its capacity and repels what harms it, this power is explicitly referred to by doctors as the power of governing the living body, and they often call it nature. So too, there is in the whole the world as a whole a power that binds its parts together, preserves its species from perishing, and also preserves individuals or species for as long as they can be preserved, and also some parts of the world. That again was all my Milos HaKadosh Baruch Hu shir, which everyone should listen to before Yom Kippurim. Okay, again, that's the most important shir that I've given. Period. Okay, but now mishpat or shofet, describing judge as shofet means judging the judged as they deserve, whether this entails reward or punishment. I'm going to read in the Hebrew. Lemunach shofet, for the term judge, I'll read on the bottom also. Kolomar, hanhagas haolam be'emtzaos huke hateva. In other words, governing the world through the laws of nature. Vehin hatovos hayachasios v'hapugaim hagdolim hayachasim hamasrachim ba'olam shechayev osam hadin hanovea min hachachma. And both the relative goods and the relative harms that occur in the world are necessitated by the justice that stems from wisdom. Okay, that's not a good translation. By virtue of the laws of nature. Vehin hatovos hayachas. Okay, I just read that. V'zo gam mashmas ti'uro kechacham o koch. This is also, this is very interesting. This is also the meaning of describing him as wise or alive. Kolomar, yodea es hametzius umasigosa, that he knows existence and apprehends it. Okay. Apprehend is a archaic English way of saying to comprehend. Yeah. I know we use apprehend to mean fear, but that's not what we mean. Like apprehension is to understand. V'zo gam mashmaos ti'uro kirotze. This is also the way of describing him as willing or wanting. Shekonim saim halalu misnahlim b'sedirus uvahanhaga ve'inam nintashim umishavim kfi hamikra ela ki hishavuso shel kol ma shemanhig oso harotze b'kavana uvarata. Let's see if this translation turned out right. This is also the meaning of describing him as willing, meaning that all existing things are conducted with order and governance and are not abandoned to come into being by chance, but rather arise like everything governed by one who wills with intention and desire. Okay. Zo gam mashmaos ti'uro kimashgiach. This is also the meaning of describing him as mashgiach. Shahanhagazo mashkefes, I don't know how to say that in modern Hebrew, as hashgachas Hashem ba'olamo. This governance is depicted as, reflects God's providence over his world, including all the forces of existence and annihilation, natural occurrences such as earthquakes and plagues, and also health and wars. Okay, so just to call your attention here, this is why Makbili is so helpful. One of the reasons. Shofet, Rotze, Mashgiach. I thought he said, I don't know why the ChatGPT doesn't do the Hebrew for Chai and Chacham. Okay, all of these are references to the same idea in different ways, namely God's governance of nature in accordance with strict justice and order. Okay, this is what we call Midas Hadin, right? But it's referring to all of these things, that God governs reality through his wisdom and through exactitude, and everything gets what it deserves. Okay, one more, and then we'll try to, and that's my last source, and then we'll try to figure this out. He refers to the More in 2:6 in the expansions, and so we have here Makbili's expansion. Oh, hold on just a second. I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. Oops. Okay, hold on. Oh. Okay, so he says here, Onish. Oops. Okay, so he says, Hushal munach zo lemalachim eloka ki hu manhige shofet. So he's explaining the term Elohim as applying to angels and as applying to judges. So he says, this term was borrowed for use regarding angels and God, as he is a governing judge. Hamunach shofet bezika lashem hu kemuvan munach mushal me'olam shel adam. The term shofet in relation to God is, of course, a metaphorical term borrowed from the human realm. Umashma uso musberes b'shnei haparakim ha'achronim b'mor ha'nevuchim, which we just read, one of ha'osim b'munach shofet. Its meaning is explained in the last two chapters of the Moreh, which deal with the term judge in Hebrew. It misunderstood that. I think this is supposed to be daf. I scanned this from my phone. So hashimush b'munach shofet mitar as ulas hakel ba'olamo l'fimash mischayev hanidon tova o onesh. The use of the term shofet describes God's actions in the world according to what the case requires, whether for good or for punishment. Mipas hadavarim hatovim yachasis v'hayisurim hagdolim hayachatis halavaya ba'olam shemachayev osam hadin hanovea min hachachma hu nikra shofet. Okay, so that's what we just read. Because of the relative good and relative great afflictions that occur in the world, which are necessitated by justice that stems from wisdom, he is called judge. Ha'onesh amaseim haraim shal bnei adam ba'al olam bidmus asonos teva umilchamos. The punishment for the evil deeds of humans manifests in the world in the form of natural disasters and wars, in accordance with what is deserved by those who are punished. When these occurrences are aligned with the natural laws of the world, nimsa sheha iruim halaluhim tahalichim tivim shal olam havai v'hefsed. It thus turns out that these events are natural processes within the world of existence and decay. Nimsa sheha mishpat hu hebet shel hashgachas Hashem ba'olamo b'emtzaus. I think this got messed up. Oh, chukei teva, the parentheses got messed up. B'emtzaus chukei teva. It follows that mishpat is an aspect of God's providence over his world through the laws of nature. Okay, so the question is, did any of this help us here? Let's go back to the Sefer HaManucha. So God is the justice. In the same way that he is the Chachma. So you've got a link here, right? That he's saying that that Rambam himself is saying that God's justice stems from his Chachma, and his Chachma is one with his essence, okay, in a sense. And so therefore saying if A equals B and B equals C, so then God's Mishpat is God. What does that mean? In a way that's not kfira, right? So you know who this works out really well for? I was thinking about this. This works out really well for the emanationists, right? For like the Kabbalists who hold that the universe is an emanation of God, you know? What was that?
I was thinking about that too.
Yeah, right. Is that if you're going to say that the world is God, then this works out really well. But we can't say that for the Rambam, you know. Yeah, maybe that's what the Ritva was saying, right? If the Ritva is following the Rashba, is following the Ramban, with I don't know what the Ramban held because it's a sod, you know. But yeah, I don't want to say that the Ramban holds that, but who knows these days? Yeah. And let's put it this way. Our primary goal is to understand what this means, but even if we don't understand what this means, can we get an idea that we can have kavanah for that's not kfira, that aligns with the statement, the king, the justice? And let me actually just now reread what Rabbi Zucker said in the Rambam Yomi chat, because that was the idea he was referring to. When he said the God Dayan HaEmes, see if I can find it. Scrolling. This was in the summer because I was at a wedding. Yeah. You know, the funny thing is you can't search for Dayan HaEmes because then all of the Brook Dayan HaEmeses will come up. What was that?
It wasn't you translated into judge of truth, or true judge. Search that.
Yeah, but I think he had a
The truth.
yeah, he had a point here. Okay, you know, actually we'll look this up. Hold on. Dayan HaEmes. Oh yeah, see, it's just all Brook Dayan HaEmeses. Oh man, okay. Oh, it wasn't in the Ram. Wait, was it in the Ram Yomi chat or was it in the community chat?
I remember seeing something like this in the community.
Okay, yeah, so it was in the community chat. Yeah. Maybe I posted about it afterwards. Okay, yeah, there's no way I can find this here. Oh, no. Okay, yeah, this is impossible.
Try judging in English, judge of truth.
Okay, yeah.
731. Yeah, right, Zucker.
731. Okay, wow. Yeah. Oh no, here we go. I got it. So he says, Rabbi Zucker said, I think the phrase Dayan Amiti means true judge. The phrase Dayan HaEmes means the judge of the truth. This is somewhat suggested in the addition to Birkas Hamazon Beves Evel, where there is the phrase Dayan HaEmes Shofit B'tzedek. I think it's a subtle but significant difference. Did he say something else?
Yeah, he said.
He said, yeah. Okay, then we got into the whole discussion of Harachaman and Av Harachaman. Okay, fine. I don't think this is gonna. Oh yeah, he says this is worthy of an entire share, but I would suggest taking a look at the Ritva's explanation from Melech HaMishpat. That's where he took us to this. Yeah. So, right. All right. I'm not gonna get bogged down on that right now.
You're saying Dias was true judge,
The judge of the truth.
The judge
Yeah.
who is true, he said.
Dayan HaEmes.
and immediately would be true judge.
Yeah, Dayan Amiti is true judge. Dayan means judge of. Rabbi Zucker said judge of the truth. Yeah. All right, but anyway, we don't need to think about that right now. And I do sense that there's an idea that connects this with where David was going. Meaning, one thing we can say for sure, when God judges, he's not assessing whether this thing is in line with some justice abstract outside of ourselves and outside of himself. He's judging whether the thing is in line with his ratzon or his chachma or his justice, you know. So, and he himself is the source of that, right? I'm going to spit out an intuition, okay, which is that the real idea of God's mishpat, according to the way the Rambam is explained in the Moreh, what is God's mishpat? It's nature, right? It's things that happen to you based on the necessity of his chachma, right? But we perceive it as God executing justice to us for good or for bad, right? That's literally what the Rambam said. I was going to read it in the Rambam again. That by virtue of the relative goods and big misfortunes that occur in the world, which are necessitated, which the law necessitates, that comes from God's chachma, he's called a shofet, and that's what Makbili said here, that all the stuff that happens in the world is God's justice, you know. So I think that is central to this idea here, that God's will. See, the normal judge needs to assess whether this is in line and then needs to execute justice. God, though, is the justice, meaning that his will directly executes justice in the world, without any interim assessment or modification, you know. And this aligns very well with my idea of the Abravanel's explanation of Yom Hadin, because according to the Abravanel, Yom Hadin, I'm just going to read this in translation here. Yom Hadin and Yom Trua, the Abravanel says that he says, since Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is the true beginning of the year, okay, again, that's not an idea that we have, which actually indicates and determines all the occurrences of the upcoming year. For this reason, it's called Yom Hadin and Yom HaMishpat, for it indicates what will be and indicates the decree that is decreed from heaven for all occurrences of that year, good and bad, for the world as a whole and for each and every country and people and for each and every person. So in other words, he explained, I mean, I read this in the whole article here. He holds that Yom Hadin, this is what he says. Okay, this din of Rosh Hashanah is not in accordance with Hashgacha Pratis, which comes specifically from him to his loved ones and to those who keep his commandments. Rather, it is in accordance with Hashgacha Klalis, that is ordered by the celestial causes that relate to all creations in that general manner. Regarding this din in Mishpat, Chazal say in the Mishnah, all inhabitants of the world pass before him like sheep. As it is stated, he fashions their hearts together. In order to explain that this din is not in accordance with Hashgacha, which relates to the entire nation of Israel, the perfected one, Rabbi Yochanan said in his statement, and all of them are examined by God in one glance. By in one glance, he was referring to that celestial circumstances at the onset of Tishrei, which determines all the affairs and inhabitants of the world. This is the din of Rosh Hashanah, which pertains to every member of the human race. It is a davar tivi in existence in accordance with the effects of the celestial world on the terrestrial world. So he holds that the Yom HaDin of Rosh Hashanah is natural law, and that's what we get judged by. But then in order to escape that judgment, then we engage in Trua and we ask for Rachamim, and that's Hashgacha Pratis. Okay, so I'm not saying that this is the same as what the Rambam is getting at, but I think it's talking about the mishpat in the world as just the laws of nature, you know. So Hamelach HaMishpat is recognizing basically that everything that happens is the direct dictate of the source of justice. The source of justice is the same as the source of the law, which is the same as what happens in the world. Something like that. Yeah, that's as far as I got. We'll see if I can put this together as an article here. But yeah, so I think the takeaway though is I think definitely we have fallback ideas, right? Which is if you're either a follower of Yechiel or if you're lazy, you can say that Melech HaMishpat and Hamelech HaMishpat are exactly the same. Okay. if you like Rashi or the first explanation in the Sefer Menucha, you can say that we have to be thinking about God's mishpat that occurs during this time of year, and his mishpat as melech is manifest, and so we switch to a melech mishpat. And then if you're daring and you want to maybe jeopardize your din by holding by kfira, you can think of this idea that God is the mishpat, and that has something to do with the fact that the laws of nature are synonymous with God's chachma, synonymous with God's ratzon, and synonymous with God's mishpat. And God carries out his mishpat absolutely and exactly, and everyone gets what they deserve, and everything that needs to be meted out is automatically meted out. And only God has that ability, because all other human judges have to make an assessment, and they also have to they have to execute the judgments themselves, or they have to harness the laws of nature to do this. Whereas for God, it is stemming from his essence. Kaviyachol. No. Yeah. All right. This is why I'm not sure if I can finish this article, but yeah. All right. Well, I got all the cards on the table. Now we have stuff to think about. Yeah. All right. Thanks for helping me think this out. In these sources.
All right, thank you.
Yep. All right. Have a good din, whatever that means.